Welcome to part 2 of evaluations. We've covered options and ways in which you can do evals. Now we're moving on to taking that information, creating a vision for change, and putting things into action. Remember what sparked your passion for camp? UltraCamp knows it's about the people, not the paperwork. That's why they built a platform to simplify your camp management. Learn more at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Camp leaders, win back your time to what matters most, your campers. Bolin's comprehensive accounting, back office solutions, and tech-enabled team free up your staff to focus on your mission. Visit bolinhq.com, that's BOWLINEHQ.com, to learn more and book a free 2-hour financial diagnostic. Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. For us in the world of summer camp, there is nothing more important than well-researched, well-planned, well-thought-out, and well-prepared leadership training. It's at the crux of all we do. It's how we deliver a safe, exciting, kind, supportive, growth-filled experience for our campers and their families. It's how we have our staff return year after year. It's how we make the biggest impact on the world around us. So join us today. We're going to delve into the world of staff training, the good, the hard, and everything in between, because we're all in it together. Welcome, everybody. We are ready to continue chatting about next steps. In our last podcast, we discussed the value of and many options for evaluating yourself, your staff, and your summer camp program. And today we want to talk about how to take that vision that you've created through all of your evaluations and turn it into actionable steps. But before we get started, we are going to take a moment just to introduce ourselves. So Gabrielle, would you go first, please?
Yes. Hey, everybody. My name is Gabs. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. My pronouns are she, her, elle. And Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities. And we do that while speaking in French et en français. Et en anglais.
And I'm Beth Allison. I'm a former camp director and executive director, and now I'm a camp consultant. And I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are she, her. And as always, I'm going to tell you that I have a true passion for intentional leadership training. We are honored today to have with us the man who started it all, the brains behind the Go Camp Pro podcast dynasty, and one of the most creative, dedicated, and daring men that we know. Welcome to our little podcast. Travis, could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I am Travis Allison from Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are he, him, and il.
Love it. All right. So camp directors make changes every year to programs, to staffing, to how they disseminate information to families, to menus. List is endless. I do feel, however, that in today's day and age, we're having to make more changes each summer than ever before. In this information age, new stuff about mental health, dealing with behavioral issues, helping parents is coming at us all of the time. And I think sometimes it feels like we can't keep up. So for me, I would like to hear what you folks think about all of this. So Travis, can we start with you? What are some of the things that you would say to camp directors who are trying to take that vision that they've sort of come up with over the past month or so and put it into actionable steps? What would you say with all this stuff that's out there?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that if you're overwhelmed by this, you're not alone. Like everybody we talk to is very overwhelmed these days. And being the kind of thoughtful Camp Code listener that you are determined to implement the stuff that you've learned. And so you're not alone. I think that I always come at these things a little different, certainly than Beth. That was the great combination of Beth and I, is that we both think about these things differently. I know for me, I need momentum for big projects, so I need a piece of it that I'm really excited about, or I need an easy piece to get going on, whether it's organizing things, whatever. So for me, I need one of those two things, something small that I can have success at early, or a piece that I'm particularly excited about that I can start with. I'm exactly the opposite of most people, where they say, take the biggest or the hardest bite out of a project first. That doesn't work for me. I will avoid that forever. And so that's my thing is get the ball rolling, get some momentum by picking one of those things, easy to get done and check off your list, or something that you're excited about in the whole big project.
Excellent. Thank you. Gab, to the other person in my life who thinks differently than I do.
I know. I love this combination because I was like, oh, prioritization is one of the things I struggle with the most. And I don't know, Travis, where you stand on prioritization, but that's something I really struggle with. So I'm very interested in this combo three, all of us together talking about this. For me, I'm looking at my list goes into two categories: I wanna and I don't wanna. And I think it's very important for me to have those because sometimes the ones that I want to do, it's because they're novelty, they're new, they're exciting, they're a challenge. It might not be the priority for the organization, might not be what is needed immediately. I do think it's important to scratch that itch though, and if it's you have some energy and you're excited about doing something, why not tackle it? Um, but I would say my number one thing actually is because sometimes I'm excited about the work. It's actually asking myself, am I the right person to do this? And
Mm,
really try to look in my team, look at our alumni, look at our volunteers, the ones that, say, hey, I was wondering if I could help in any which way, and actually truly asking them. So, how can I take myself out of these tasks as much as possible? And if there really isn't anybody else and I'm truly the right person to do it, then who's going to be my teammate? So I'm making sure that it's getting having another person that's looking at it through a different lens. Um, but yes, I try to assign it to somebody that's not me. That's my number one. That's where I start.
thank you. I think my first real piece of advice is not to look at all those evals and think that you have to make dozens of changes to policies and procedures and program and staffing all at once. Like we have said for years on Camp Code, during staff training, you pick your battles. So, same here, I would prioritize what needs are most important for this coming summer and focus your energy there. And if you can, I would do this together with team members, whether it's full-time or leadership summer staff. If you're the only full-timer at your camp, which many of us were and are, and then gather all the information from the evals that you have from staff, from parents, from campers, and find patterns. What jumps out most? So don't worry too much about those one-offs. You're always going to have concerns or complaints from just about everybody because you asked for them. So it's really important to analyze the data and see where the concerns are popping up consistently. And then I would divide them into categories. So choose whatever's working for you for this coming season: program, staffing, camp culture, daily schedule, food. There will always be complaints about food, accommodation. And for me, I personally would do this visually, but then again, do what works for you. So like I'd use an entire wall and a bunch of color coded post-it notes and print out the concerns or the issues and place them under the categories, remove any ones that are similar, and then walk away. So just take some time to just let what you've learned be absorbed and processed. Don't try to do all this all at once. So another time I do the exact same thing with what you and your camp were commended on this summer, put them on different colored post-it notes, again under appropriate categories, and walk away. Maybe do this near the end of the day so that you could have a glass of wine or something to celebrate all of those successes, but walk away. So on another day, take a look at each category and then prioritize one or two changes that need to be made. And you can certainly sit down at your computer to do this, but for me, seeing it all in big in its colorful glory on the wall helps me to think better. And I can get up and walk around a room and pace and ponder, bounce up and down, whatever it is I need, which is all helpful for me for deep thinking. And I'll get into some more ideas of what you do after you've sorted out all those categories. But my big point here is like, don't do it all at once. Sometimes spending a day analyzing evals can make you feel defensive or despondent or overwhelmed. So take the time in between to pause and process, and then come back to the table with a clear head and ready to look for the opportunities that are going to help your people have the best experience. Okay, so we are going to take a really quick break to hear from our sponsor. But before we do that, Travis, did you have a something?
I do. I have a couple of
Okay.
things coming up
Yeah.
from what both of you have said.
Okay.
Number one, based on some of the stuff that Gab said, there's a guy named David Allen who wrote a book called Getting Things Done. And one of his big things is a structure for how you kind of decide what to do with things. So when you've got your list, what you do with it. And his thing is do it if it's less than 2 minutes long, delegate it, which Gab was talking about, or defer it, which means put it into a spot. So this is the first time all the information. That's the first thing is do it, delegate it, or defer it. Defer it's when you're going to have to actually act on it. But that was one of the things. And I know this isn't the show about taking in the information, but if I can add one thing to make this part of
Yeah,
it easy
please.
from taking in the information, if you use a simple survey tool called the Net Promoter Score, you can look up NPS, Net Promoter Score, on anything. It is the best basic way of getting good, useful information. Like that's the study. It's been studied in university. The smallest thing we can ask to get the best information. And one of the things I like about the NPS is you're going to end up with the score on a spreadsheet. And net promoters in the way they think about it are people who would score you an 8 or above, because the question is, how likely are you to recommend us to your friends and family? So 8 or above are net promoters. They're the people that are already talking about you. 5 and below are the problems, and 6 and 7 are just the mad people. So the first thing I would do is anybody who answered 6 or 7, I would just cut out their information. They don't care enough to be mad at us, or they don't care enough to tell us about their friends. And so that cuts down on the amount of data that you have to use. And then you pick and choose the people that are most enthusiastic about us, or the people that see the biggest problems, with the caution that people who are 5s, 1 to 5s, cared enough to answer your survey. So they're not nobody, they're not write-offs, because the mad people are the ones whose information doesn't matter. But the 1s to 5s will be the ones who cared enough to take the time, and that means that they have some stuff to offer, and they can always be won back.
Perfect. That's an excellent tool. Thank you. We could have used you on the last podcast, but I'm
Absolutely.
glad you brought it up today. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Now we take the quick break to hear from our sponsor. A special offer from UltraCamp for Camp Code listeners. Get ready for next season's staff recruiting with the Camp Experience Wheel, a powerful tool to prevent burnout, boost retention, and make sure your staff feels supported. Download it for free at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. You need tools that work as hard as you do. UltraCamp's platform is packed with powerful features, keeping your camp running smoothly and efficiently, so you can focus on what truly matters. With UltraCamp's powerful tools, you're in control. Automate tasks like registration and billing, easily manage authorized pickups, create custom payment plans for your camp, generate reports to get key insights, streamline hiring with built-in background checks. Get back to what you love. UltraCamp helps you spend less time on admin tasks and more time creating unforgettable camp experiences. Ready to see if UltraCamp is the perfect fit? Schedule your free personalized demo at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Camp leaders, do you often find yourself bogged down with bookkeeping, accounting, and other back office tasks, taking precious time away from what matters most, your campers? Imagine a solution that frees up your staff to focus on creating impactful and memorable experiences for your campers. That's where Bolin comes in. Bolin offers comprehensive accounting back office solutions designed specifically for camps. Our tech enabled team handles everything from payroll and bookkeeping to financial reporting, compliance, expense management, spend control, and more, allowing your staff to passionately pursue your number one purpose. With Bolin, you can streamline your camp's financial operations, reduce stress, and ensure your team is free to make a lasting impact in campers' lives. It's time to win back your time and work with a financial partner that truly understands camps. Whether you're a for-profit, Not for profit, overnight, or day camp, Bolin has a solution for you. Visit bolinhq.com, that's BOWLINEHQ.com, to learn more and book a free 2-hour financial diagnostic. The report is yours whether you sign up or not. Let Bolin take care of your accounting needs so you can focus on what truly matters, your campers. All right, we are back. Travis, what else have you got? Anything else that you've got that you would suggest in how we go about this?
If you have all of your data compiled on a spreadsheet, meaning that you have created it in some way or asked people to do a survey in some way that you can use it later, I think there are some good AI tools for doing what they call sentiment analysis. So you can look at their answers and see kind of tone. Now, if you do what I just said and you throw at the middle people, you're going to have either strong positives or strong negatives. But you can also use that AI to do the same thing that Beth talked about, which is the pattern matching. You can take the answers and put them, take 30 answers and make them 5 because there are about 5 things it'll look for the pattern. So that's one thing I would say. And then so that gives you priority and a bit of focus. But I think from my perspective, in terms of implementing change, as a person whose whole life is communicating about camp, I would say one of the most powerful things you can say to anybody who's filled out a survey, staff, campers, or parents, is because of your input, we're making this change. And that shows that you're listening to those families. It shows that you take this stuff seriously. If it's a very specific person who came up with one miracle idea, then name them to your whole community. But part of getting good feedback on the regular is that you have to give them good feedback. You have to reinforce when people give you good feedback. So part of that is because of your feedback, this is happening. And I think that that is something that you can start from the planning stages, from your very first analysis of this. You can start, we've got great feedback. We're looking forward to making the changes based on the things you said.
Love it. Thank you. Gab?
I love that too, because I think we think often about our families when we're doing surveys, but I think last year we changed how we did our check-ins with our staff and gave feedback, because a lot of our staff talked about how they wanted feedback. And in my experience of the last couple of summers, there was a high want for feedback, but when feedback was provided, it wasn't received well. And so we worked with some key staff members on shifting how we were doing feedback, and we presented it to our staff. And we did say, because of our surveys and our check-ins, more feedback was wanted, and this is how we've made the shifts based on your feedback. And anyway, sorry, a lot of feedback on feedback, but I digress. The point is that this summer, one or two staff members said, I know I said I wanted feedback. She's like, well, now it's a lot of work to receive feedback. And I said, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it felt like it was being being received so much more because they knew this is what they asked for. And sometimes, you ask for things, and then when you get it, it's important to know that it's the mass majority. And so I think that's a really, really helpful thing. I think, like, when we're looking at prioritization and how do we decide, and all that kind of stuff, I think that you can have, families can be frustrated about, let's just say, like, the food. And sometimes families can, or staff members can be confused because of, the maybe new program that we're implementing, they're not understanding, and it didn't go well this summer. And you're trying to decide, what's going to have, if you're very limited and you don't have that much resources and you don't have that much time and you already feel really tired and you already feel like things are weighing you down, what should I start? Where should I go? And I think that one of the things that I've tried to look at camp is I just simply try to look at, like, who are the people that we are serving. And I look at, the campers, look at the families, look at the staff, and I try to see amount of time and energy that's going into each one, and then look at, am I doing something new for them this year? Am I doing something new for this group? Am I doing something new for this group? Am I doing something new for this group? And sometimes what that does is it helps me, whenever we're trying to do change or implement things, you don't want to have anybody left behind. And even if you have one group that everything stays the same because, well, it's just working really well, really well. Is there a little tweak that you can do that can just say like, I'm listening to you, or this is how we're improving upon things? And I think the reason why you want to do that is, for one, so that certain people don't get forgotten. Like your fifth year families, maybe your first year families, you're putting a lot of energy and time into them. Maybe your first year staff members, you're doing the same thing, but your fourth year staff members, like, they already know it, they don't need all the onboarding things. So looking at something new that you can do or change is helpful. And it also reinforces that your organization is about improvement, which also means it's about change. And especially when we're talking about staff members, they have to be accustomed to the fact that we're always improving and that we're always changing things. So I try to look at all the people and just isolate what are we doing differently this year, and then I don't get bogged down necessarily with everything that I need to do. I know that all of my people are getting taken care of.
Nice. And just a thought for you, Gab, for future podcasting. Perhaps we need to do one on feedback. Is that what you're really asking for? Or is
Right.
it positive affirmation?
I
Because I
know.
think that's what they think of with feedback sometimes. And so we'll do a podcast about front loading, that feedback isn't always positive affirmation, even though there may be many of
It's
it
a
in there.
it's a lot, and even, yes, and being well, that is what we had to implement this year, especially when we were giving positive affirmations or feedback. It wasn't because we weren't sitting down at a scheduled time. It didn't feel like it was real, so
Mm.
we changed our language to help with that. But yes, it is definitely a
Yep.
podcast.
Lots of tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So for me, if we go back to you're all done your post-it art, because I would do it that way where Travis would use AI simply because just works better for me. And you've narrowed it down to several issues that you want to work on this year. Maybe you have like one or two for each of the categories. Maybe you have none in some of your categories. Everybody's going to be different. So here's where I would go next. So just a few ideas from me of some steps that you can take to define that action plan. So number one, I think it's important to define your end goal for each change that you want to make. So it could be as simple as changing the time of lunch each day, to hiring 3 new positions on your summer staff and eliminating 2 old ones, whatever you're feeling that you need to change. But what's the end goal of that specific change? And I think it's important to articulate it and to talk it through with maybe team members. Number 2 is then, for me, because I'm a list person, like listing steps that you'll need to follow in order to get to whatever change it is you're looking for. So we need to be really specific in these. And then 3 is prioritize those tasks and add deadlines for each one. So for example, we need to change our staff application language and we need to do it by October 15th, like whatever that happens to be. And then I think number 4 for me is identify any necessary resources. So like, what's it going to take to achieve this goal in terms of time or money or connections or skills? Maybe there isn't any of those affected, but what could those be? And how many of them do you already possess? Or how many do you need to acquire? Maybe you need to find someone who's really good at grant writing, for example, or maybe one of your volunteers is a plumber, whatever it is, but what are those resources? And then finally, I think it's what obstacles, if any, are you going to face with each of these changes? And figure out the ones that you can control and the ones that you can't. And then figure out if there's anybody who can help with the ones you can't control. And of course, there are going to be some that you have no control over, so don't get too hung up on those ones. But knowing ahead of time or thinking through some of the possible obstacles in advance can help avoid some pitfalls and put in necessary steps to ensure success. And I think it's also really important to acknowledge that some of these changes might be a little bit messy at first. So be honest with your people and yourself and let them know it's possible that things won't be and feel perfect right out of the gate with these changes, of course, depending on what they are. There might be a learning curve for everybody to get used to things. Summer camps are notorious for resisting big change and small. Because people have such passion and loyalty to camp. So there could be mistakes, people might mess up, and the changes you're suggesting may not work out in the end. So I think it's just important to be upfront with your folks about that, and that it'll all be okay, because we deal with people and their baggage and their feelings all the time, and much of our clientele and staff are under the age of 25. So still learning and growing at rapid paces. And of course, we're still learning and growing too. But I think if you take the time to really think through that vision and any changes you want, or feel that you need to make, you can lessen maybe the errors or the miscalculations and try to avoid any possible negative feelings or experiences. So I think that's just something to keep in mind and remember. Travis.
What's your question? How can I help?
Do you have any other ideas to share with us?
Oh, just generally any other ideas. I do. I think that it's something that I've been talking about on the Camp Hacker podcast for a long time, something that I've been teaching at conferences that will make this easier is the idea that's generally referred to as lean, meaning that you want to run an organization that has little waste. And the waste is money, human resources, time. And as camp, we tend to waste human resources at a staggering rate. And one of the things about lean, meaning running an organization without waste, is implementing change is a big part of it. It gives you the chance to create a culture where that change is expected, where people will come and always see change, and I think become excited to see the change. But part of that is just really implementing a lean culture at camp, and that goes from your year-round staff to your senior seasonal staff and counselors, and eventually even kids at the best camps, I think, could have kids do it. And part of it is that we make lots of little changes so that we get used to and are kind of prepared mentally for big changes when they come. And I guess what I really want to get across is don't underestimate the power of small changes. People may not say, "Holy cow, that's totally different." But if people leave your drop-off day that used to take them an hour and a half and now takes them 45 minutes, they're going to leave happier. And they're going to be, again, communicating about the value of camp. I want any parent to come to us to have such an amazing customer experience that they tell their friends. And this is all part of it. Small changes, consistent ones. And the other part of this, which I think helps again manage the shock and the "you're changing my place" kind of thing, is that every person is expected to make change at camp. Every staff member, that's part of your description. Your job is to make camp better every day. One of the frameworks for lean that I like the best is called 2-second lean. And there's gobs of resources on lean, but 2-second lean is, I think, one of the best breakdowns, because all you have to say is to each person at camp, what did you do to make camp 2 seconds better today? It's not a big project. It's not lots of resources. All you have to do is train them to look for those things. And then they're making change. They're used to change. It's part of the camp is that we do make changes. And I think that makes it easier for everybody to understand when we need to go in on big changes. But most camps, most years aren't going to make giant changes. They are just going to make things that make run a little better. We're going to take the feedback in and do that. So I think all of that helps with a culture of change. One of our old camp directors that worked for Beth and I, his name is Adam Brown, and he said camp is a place where people learn about change. And I think about that often.
Thank you. Gabs?
I love that. I love the small changes. I also love small changes at camp. It's just like the constant tweaking towards efficiency and less frustration towards lack of communication. And I love it. We talk about mission statement a lot on our podcast for good reasons. And this will segue obviously into our next podcast. But how do we get people on board with change? And if you can't see what you're doing doesn't fit into your mission statement, either you have a bigger problem and we need to talk about your mission statement, and maybe there's a board's conversation, or maybe you're trying a program that is just not fitting, and maybe it's for financial reasons, but how do you justify these changes if it's not fitting within your mission statement? So I'm somebody that has a lot of ideas. I have an endless amount of ideas and possibilities, which is not something I suffer from, but I sometimes get a little distracted because is this what, for example, Camp Waro is about? Is this who we're serving? Are these changes helpful for my staff, for my campers, for my families? So, um, and then as Beth talks about often is reverse engineering it. What do you want it to look like in the end? What do you want it to, what's the people's experiences of this? What's your site's experience of this? And then reverse engineering backwards when, how much does it cost? How much time does it take? It's something that we're repeating a lot. Who do we need to get involved, so that make sure that it's realistic? And anything that we do, I know within our organization, if it's involving other people, we typically try to do it for 2 seasons, unless it's drastically not great for whatever reasons. If it's a new project or it's a new way of doing things, we try it for 2 seasons, because the first season is a learning curve and deserves some time to adjust, deserves some maybe tweaking. And then if after 2 seasons it doesn't work, then we get rid of it. But it's always worth we're trying it for two seasons. If unless there's something horribly wrong with it, then get rid of it. But yeah.
Unless you try to change the entire meal schedule from something idea you got
Oh,
at a conference
well,
and your kitchen staff threatens to quit the first week of camp, Travis, right?
well, it sounds
This
really
is a risk.
specific.
I still think it was a great idea, but we canned it because of staff feedback.
Yeah, and the kitchen staff was incredibly unhappy. So,
Oh,
you know, it was worth a try, but we didn't give it 2 summers, Gap. We gave it leadership training in the first week of camp, but
some people just
that
don't
was it.
have vision, so some people just can't see the big picture.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes. All right. So I was really trying to come up with an analogy, because that's just the way my brain works, so that we can all relate to. For those of you who struggle with, like me, with spreadsheets and data and AI and all of that kind of stuff, and who like to work more with imagery and metaphors. So this is why the three of us are on this podcast today, because we're getting different ways of doing it. But think of your strategic plan for any changes this coming year like a dinner party. So it's something special and it's important and it's something that you want to do well, and you want to make people feel welcome and well taken care of. And you want the atmosphere and the environment to help people open up and enjoy one another's company and have a really great experience. So for me, I would take the time to draw this one out so that you have something to hang by your desk throughout the year as you continue to prepare for next year. So paint it or use colored pencils, or as we Canadians call them, pencil crayons. Whatever makes you happy and sparks your creativity. So think of the dinner table. So it's got 4 sturdy legs or maybe a very central base, but be sure your strategic planning is on something solid. And as Gab said, it's aligning with your camp's mission and your vision. And write your mission down the table legs. Then set your table. So choose a beautiful cloth, design it with important sayings or visuals of your camp's history. And this covers your solid foundation and gathers everyone in and shows off what's important to you. All right, so here's the work. So place your glasses at each table setting. And these for me are your cultural changes. So any changes you're trying to make this summer to your camp's culture. So I chose glasses for this because you want to be very transparent. You want folks to see clearly before they drink from it and understand the ingredients. So yeah, you can put a picture not on the table, like on the table instead of individual glasses, but you shouldn't all drink from the same pitcher anyway. And everybody needs to hold their own version of cultural changes at your camp. Then you're going to arrange your plates. So these for me would represent any program changes you want to make. It's often those changes that are the hardest for folks to accept. So we want that to be what's at the center of everybody's place setting. And then add your knife, representing anything you're going to cut out this year. Write them down. Write them across your knives. Your spoons, anything you want to pick up and really slurp up this summer. Your forks, what you need to hold in place all year. Anything that went really well last year and you don't want to slide all over your plates, but you want it to hold stable. Your napkins, anything you need to clean up. What didn't go so well last summer and what you need to mop up. Your sideboard, this is where you put those dishes that don't fit on the table. So that's your parents or your camp families. They're not always at the table, but they're certainly very close by, and we're always going to go to them to add more to our party. And of course, you're going to want flowers on your table. So draw those in, and on the petals, write in what you want to celebrate this year. And change up your flowers frequently, because we can't rely on the same ones to last forever. We want to celebrate new things that come up. And then finally, the candles. Write on them what you want to spark an interest in this summer, or what you want to light up this coming summer. So just another way to visualize and stay on task with your new vision all year long. And don't forget, we always make room for more people at the table. All right, we are gonna, does anybody else have anything to add before we recap? Want to make sure everybody's good? All right, so our famous recap from Gab: tomato, tomato, tomato.
Recap, recap, recap. Okay, we have a recap. This is fun because we don't always have Travis on with us. It just mixes things up in a really beautiful way. And guess what? We start off with Travis reminding us we are not alone. And actually, Beth and I know this very, very well, because we talked to quite a few camp professionals, and there's a lot of tears, and it's about usually the same stuff: parents and staff. So there we go. Next, moving on to Beth. Look for patterns, which is one of my favorite things to do. That's so it's going to prevent us from doing a pendulum swing. Why don't you do some wall art? You can use some Post-its, and then, walk away from it, because you need a little bit of a distance. And then remember, don't do all of this at once. One of the ways to do that, you can swing over to Gabs, is to delegate. Hey, maybe I shouldn't do this. Who could do this in my place? And while you are evaluating, let's ask Travis what we can do with that. Well, David Allen is one of the people that can help you prioritize your things, getting stuff done. There's also a Net Promoter Score, NPS, if you want to be really, really cool. And then also lean ways. So for me, these are really, really great tools that we can be using. And as we are going through our tools, and we're trying to remind ourselves, all right, I can't do everything, I'm going to use other people, we also want to connect with our mission statement. This is really, really key when we're trying to communicate with other people. And just remember, when we are doing changes, even if they're small ones, let everybody know that because of your input, we are making this change. And at camp, we learn about change. And that is our recap for today.
Thanks, Gab. Great as always. As we wrap things up, please let us know any topics you would like us to discuss, or guests you recommend that we have on the show, or any great leadership training tips that you have to share. We would love to hear from you. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we would love it if you could leave us a rating and review in your podcasting app. So if you would like to get in touch with any of us individually, here's how you do it. So Gab, where can they find you?
You can get in touch with me at info@ouareau.com, ouareau.com, or you can check out where I work at ouareau.com.
Thank you. Travis,
Thanks.
where can they find you?
You can look at gocamp.pro on all the socials, and I am Travis at gocamp.pro. And I will say that I have purposely been putting a lot of interesting things on LinkedIn this fall. So if you want some good advice and tools, then follow me on LinkedIn, add me on LinkedIn, would be great.
That's so good to know.
Thank you. And shockingly, I'm Beth at gocamp.pro. And you can check us out at gocamp.pro. So for our next podcast, we're going to be diving into how to teach your summer staff to implement any new changes that you're making. And as usual, our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And again, we'd love to hear some of yours, so send them our way. But this week's best practice comes from Travis.
Thank you very much. I have two. Number one is a structure,
Don't set a trend.
A format that I have been working on a lot in trying to implement in camps. That is about communication, and it is that what we need to understand about any communication that goes out, and most of this is measurable. We need to understand what makes parents, what makes staff, what makes rental group contacts, whatever, open, read, absorb, act on, and share the communications that you send them. So that is a structure that will make any sort of communication things easier when you're making big changes or little. And one of the changes that I hope you make is to be really intentional about your communication and looking at that open, read, absorb, act on, and share mnemonic. It's not an acronym, Beth, I know, but it is a mnemonic. Is a good way to break things down into smaller pieces when you're looking at your communications and measuring them. So that's one. The other thing I was thinking about for this is whenever a part of this, you're pulling out the things, you're making your plan, you've got the big picture, you're looking at one thing, sometimes that can be overwhelming and it's hard to know where to start. And we've alluded to today, and I mean, it's come up other times before. Both Gab and I have ADHD, and I know
We
from
do.
presenting at conferences that there are like per job percentages of people with ADHD. Summer camp has a lot of them because it suits us, especially the summer parts suit us. So between emergency services workers and camp directors, those are two professions with a lot.
You don't
So
say.
a tool
We're
from
just drawn to Beth, honestly. We saw Beth. And all the ADHDers were like, must be close to this person.
Yes. Well, I mean that follows something I often say, Gab, when I talk about working at camp, when I say I'm a very good camp director, but I worked with and then married the best camp director.
Oh yeah.
So I know that I would never have been as good of one without Beth.
I hear you.
Anniversary was yesterday, Travis. You don't have to say all the nice things today.
Let me give you a tool for making
Yes.
change, breaking this down. And the reason I mention ADHD is because it is built for neurodivergent people. It is a website called goblin.tools. So when you go into a project like this and you want to implement something, change big or small, you just kind of know what the title of it is, you know what the section is called. Put that into Goblin Tools, and it will go through and break the steps down for you. It'll break it out into from that big overwhelming thing into here are the steps. And when you have steps, then you can do it, delegate it, or defer it effectively. But sometimes just the act of breaking something down is incredibly important, but very hard for brains like mine. And so this is a thing that'll give you a foot in the door.
It's amazing. I use it. It's fantastic. Like camp coders, like even let's just say organizing your office. You can say, I need to organize my office. I have all these things to organize, and they can break it down. And even if it's not broken down enough, you can take that piece and then break it down even more. Also, for people that are on the spectrum that might have a hard time reading tone, or when you're sending a message reading tone, one of my teammates is on the spectrum and she uses it not for the organizational aspect because she's got that built in and she's amazing at it. She uses it when she sends out an email. She's like, how does this sound? And so once it was written, this sounds thoughtful yet snarky. And I was like, that is exactly. And she was like, okay. And Goblin Tools could adjust it for her. So it was quite, anyways, it's a fantastic tool. I agree with this one.
And it's free.
Yeah.
Even more amazing for camp directors. All right. Thanks, everybody, for a great show today. Thanks, Travis, for joining us. We're really grateful for your time and for all the amazing tools that you have shared so folks can get out and do these changes.
Thanks for having me.
It was our pleasure. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. And of course, you can check out all our other podcasts, including the Camp Hacker podcast, where you'll hear Travis on the regular at gocamp.pro/podcasts. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. And thanks for the listening, friends.